Thank you all for coming to this morning session for professional development. Our panel today is just, I think, an absolutely fantastic one, and I'm very excited to hand over the floor, let them share their expertise, and also, if we have time at the end, maybe open up for some questions. I have with me today from the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, L'Oreal Bailey and Tamika Foust. From the Chicago House, I have Lynnea Karlic. And from George Washington University, I have DJ Ralston. So thank you all for being here this morning. The flow of this panel I will go one by one with our panelists, of course, with L'Oreal and Tamika being from the same organization. We'll split time and answers. But we'll go ahead and ask a dedicated question of the panelists. Let the panelists talk about what their organization is, what they do, share any slides that they may or may not have brought. And then we'll ask the dedicated question, go through that, and then I have 3 questions for the panel as a whole as we are complete. So if I can, please, L'Oreal Bailey and Tamika Foust, if you can tell us a little bit about what the AIDS Foundation of Chicago is, and if you can follow that up with describing what your statewide network is and how people can engage with that network.
Thank you, Andy. Good morning. My name is L'Oreal Bailey. And Tamika, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Tamika Foust.
Thank you for having us. But we're from AIDS Foundation of Chicago. But basically, AFC is an organization that's been around for about 35 years. We have helped lead the fight to health equity and social justice amongst people living with HIV and AIDS. We offer an array of different services that includes case management, housing. We're huge advocacy across Chicago, but we also go downstate to Springfield and advocate on a various amount of different policies. We also offer, which me and Tamika are part of the prevention team, but we are more so with community and capacity building. I'm trying to make sure that I cover everything. Tamika, do you have anything? No?
You did a good job. I was sitting here like, okay, go for it. But to add to that, I think overall AFC is just really an organization that seeks to make sure that they are very inclusive and diverse on the people that we service. It does not matter your walk of life. It does not matter your lifestyle. If you are human, if you are in need, we are there to give you the service and resources you need to live a safe and productive life. So as L'Oreal stated, we do a lot in advocacy and policy building. But I think the greatest work that we do is also in the communities and helping people who have been stigmatized and who feel that they don't have anyone else that they can talk to and rely on. We go and meet people where they are. So that is like the biggest part of what we do, because we need people to understand and realize that at the end of the day, we all need help at some point in our lives, and we're just reaching out to do the best that we can to make sure that we give them the resources and the services that are needed.
And just to, Andy, to go back to your question, the question was describe your statewide network and how could...
Yes. And how can we engage with that? How do we access your network?
So AFC, like I said, is a Chicago-based organization, but we work with various organizations across Chicago, but not only Chicago, but downstate as well. Particularly for our we have different partners across Chicago, but we've worked part of a huge amount for our particular, what me and Tamika focus on, is correction clients. And those are clients that have been in the Illinois Department of Corrections facility, Cook County Jail, but we basically strive for those that are positive, that are HIV positive. So for individuals to get in contact with us, we connect with IDOC. We also work with Illinois Department of Public Health. We have individuals that come through Public Health Institute, a Metropolitan Chicago. We also have a streamline of different networks where individuals can reach out and connect with us. And that's through our telemedicine, UIC, which is one of our partners, through their telemedicine program. We also work with Inside Out Network. And we also have different agencies. We work closely with Ruth M. Ralston Core Center, which a lot of the individuals that are being released from jail or prison, they usually follow up at Core Center for their doctor appointments. But we also have a 1-800 number that individuals can call in or be referred to. And if we cannot service them, we will connect them to an array of different services. So just for instance, if they're not a corrections client, but they're looking to get into our Ryan White case management program, or they're looking for housing, depending on what resources they are looking for, they can definitely call the 1-800 number, but they can also call AFC's main line, and then the receptionist will direct them to the different departments that depending on what the client or consumer, or if we have different agencies that's trying to connect with us, they'll direct them to the right person. And if not, once the staff person gets that information, they'll direct them to accordingly.
And
Excellent,
in
excellent.
addition to that, I am now building out the employment factor, because we do understand that people need jobs in order to sustain themselves, especially when it comes to healthcare. You need to be connected to something. So at this point in time, I'm actually building out a network of various organizations in and around the Chicagoland area, as well as I'm going to venture around the state as a whole, so that we can be able to give these services no matter where that person resides. I'm also developing partnerships and linkages with colleges and universities around the state of Illinois. So we want to be all inclusive. We want to give opportunities and chances wherever they may exist. So employment is on the horizon for the population that we service as well.
And not
That
only
sounds like
that,
an awesome project.
Thank you. And not only that, I forgot to mention, we do attend Illinois statewide meetings. And for those meetings, we do attend to get the latest updates, but we also want to receive any valuable information that can help not only our clients, but clients at partner agencies, so that we sit on various different task force that array of things. We have the reentry, we have the workforce development. All of our teams sit on different task force so that we can bring and service our clients to the best of our ability.
Excellent. L'Oreal, Tamika, thank you. And we'll have more for you. I do have one quick question came through the chat that I think might be really just a knockout right now. Maria wants to know if you serve Elgin, Illinois.
I'm sorry. Mine skipped. Can you repeat the question, Andy?
Yes, sorry. Maria is asking if you serve Elgin, Illinois.
We have an actual corrections case manager that is located in Joliet I'm going to get the exact agency, but she services those rural areas for clients. She's not actually in Elgin, but she has received clients from the rural area around there.
So maybe we'll connect you all afterwards.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. We'll circle back here in a few minutes. Next, from Chicago House, Lynnea Karlic is with us, and Lynnea, as well as telling us about Chicago House and what your organization does. Your question is, if you could also share some of the successful program models that you have implemented and some of those successes or learning opportunities, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Lynnea Karlic, she, her, hers, and I'm the Director of Employment Services with Chicago House Social Service Agency. I have a couple slides to share so that you have a visual cue and how to contact me. I'm representing the employment department, but Chicago House has an array of programs, which I'm not going to get into the details, but I do think sharing our mission is important. So I'm going to share my screen here and talk about this stuff here. So let's see, slideshow. So first of all, Chicago House was founded in 1985. And so the main focus of the population as we started in 1985 is HIV folks. This is our mission now, is we are empowering and serving people living or vulnerable with HIV to lead healthy and dignified lives, and through compassionate, client-centered support and care. So the focus of our organization is in housing, health, employment, and prevention. And so in all those arenas, we're assisting folks. The employment program started in the early 2000s. And so it wasn't a program that was something that was immediately in need in the 80s because people were dying. And then as folks were engaged with medications and their health improved or allowed people to stay alive, disability resources were being cut off from people. And so a lot of people who were on disability for some time were being forced back to work. And they didn't have, one, there was a ton of discrimination happening in the workforce at that time. And people didn't really know and have education about HIV. And then also the medical conditions that were going on for people were really intense. And so people needed oftentimes assistance in getting back into the workforce and also navigating the resources and just workforce in general. So the populations that we work with in our employment program, I'm going to focus right now on the trans population. So Transworx in the employment program was founded in 2013, and it specifically provided employment services to trans community. And so Transworx is focused on people's identity and working along that in employment and to advance employment through career coaching, building workshops, skills building workshops, and mentorship opportunities. There's a ton of discrimination that trans people face or gender expansive people face in employment. I think Mark did a really amazing job in discussing some of those barriers. And so today our employment program, like Chicago House serves, the majority of people Chicago House serves are people impacted by HIV or vulnerable to HIV or HIV positive. The employment program serves LGBTQ plus folks, people who have HIV or and living with HIV, and people living with a disability. So the employment program serves an array of populations. We offer in our programs career assistance and exploration, maintenance of employment. So sometimes we have people also that are underemployed that we work with, and one-to-one programming as well as a cohort model. And so some of the programs that we really have that are successful in, we have general employment coaching like for all of our clients, one-to-one. And we really focus on the one-to-one programming and looking at individual goals, what people are looking to achieve for their career, or just getting a job, or just making ends meet, or engaging with the Department of Disability and how do they manage being on disability and working, or it could just be getting a part-time job. And we connect people with different resources. And we also have cohorts of programs. We have one program called the Community Health Apprenticeship Program that is specific to LGBTQ young people. When I say young people, it's younger people. Like the focus of that program is for 18 to 34-year-olds who are Black and Brown LGBTQ identified so they get into a cohort style training program to become HIV testers, and then can get jobs in the HIV field. So people getting employment and starting careers in nonprofits as HIV testers. So that really hits a lot of HIV positive community if they're young, younger, and then also LGBTQ, HIV, like in who is testing most positive for HIV. It's like who's impacting the community the most is we're training them to be testers. Another program that we also have is the Transworx Workshops. And these workshops that we do, be it either in community health for the apprenticeship program or the Transworx workshops, or we have also done things like disability workshops in the past, also with employment, they really focus on identity. So our employment skills building is all the things of resume, career development, interview skills, but they focus and hone in on the community in which the individuals are coming from, because they're facing barriers in some way and also have enormous resiliency. And so I find, not just me, we find in the organization that tapping into that really builds a common goal in a cohort style for learning and advancement in career development. So this is just my information here. If you're looking to find out info about the employment program, our website is there. I'm sure that these slides can be shared so that you have a link to our website, my email, and then also my phone number. And in terms of our employment program, so the Community Health Apprenticeship Program is a really successful program where we have a cohort style, and people who are engaged with our programmings have a 67% of employment. And what that means is people have to engage with us regularly. And so employment programming is not a one visit deal. It's something where people oftentimes who are trans identified, people who are LGBTQ young people, people who are at higher risk of homelessness, who have long-term HIV, or even newly diagnosed, need extra supports and resources to navigate these arenas for employment. And that can be because there's discrimination, or maybe people don't have access to the resources. Now, who we serve Chicagoland. We do have a lot of times people contacting us, especially folks who are trans and gender expansive, who don't have resources where they're living. And they'll say, we're coming, I'm moving to Chicago. What can I do to get a job? And so we do serve Chicagoland at large.
Excellent. Thank you, Lynnea. And I think those
Let me stop sharing this. Yeah, let me stop sharing my
fantastic examples. And to answer your question, yes, the presentation, those slides are already available on the online agenda. So they will be there as you displayed them. So thank you very much. Next, we have DJ Ralston. And DJ, I need to start with an apology because when I announced you at the beginning, I greatly abbreviated who you're here representing today. So if I may, DJ Ralston is here with us from the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, otherwise known as the Collaborative, George Washington University Center for Rehabilitation, Counseling, Research, and Education. So my apologies. We're so happy to have you. And I do have a question for you, as well as giving you the opportunity to describe your organization and what you're here representing today. So if you can tell us about yourself and about your organization, and then follow that up with what population are we, what's I'm trying to say here? What are the population we're really discussing? When we talk about who you're serving, like who is that?
Sure. Thank you. And actually, Andy, you don't worry about that. It's a very long title, or like a lot of organizational mentions. And I feel like that's what happens when you work for a university, which I do. So as Andy said, I work for George Washington University. I work for the Center in Rehabilitation, Counseling, Research, and Education. We have a couple of programs, an online master's program, as well as a master's program on campus in DC that supports folks who are interested in getting a master's degree in vocational rehabilitation counseling. So I work for NTACT, which is how we would abbreviate that very long technical assistance center. And that center really focuses on young folks ages 14 to 24 with disabilities and helping them transition from adolescence to adulthood, including post-secondary education, training, competitive integrated employment, and independent community living at the levels desired. In addition, I work for two other TA centers at George Washington University, all three of which, the one I've already talked about, are funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Rehabilitation Services Administration. which is the entity that's responsible for overseeing the public vocational rehabilitation program. So in Illinois, that's DRS, or the Department of Rehabilitation Services, who specifically supports people with disabilities in helping them to attain, maintain, advance in or return to work. So I work also for the Center for Innovative Training and Vocational Rehabilitation and the VR Technical Assistance Center on Quality Management. So that's a lot of mouthful. So what do I really do? Basically, my job at GW is to support the different state vocational rehabilitation agencies. So again, in Illinois, that would be DRS, but support them in helping to execute the program goals of their program. So that's predominantly helping them support people with disabilities in going back to work. So I have started to do a lot of work around helping state VR agencies, which is how Ronnie found me, is specifically around supporting LGBTQ+ populations, because it's an area near and dear to my heart. So my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am non-binary, I am neurodiverse, and I just believe that this population tends to experience a fair amount of barriers. So in terms of DRS and who DRS serves, along with all the other state vocational rehabilitation agencies out there, they typically serve anybody who has a disability that in some way presents a barrier to employment. So Lynnea, listening to you talk about what, like what y'all have going on at Chicago House sounds pretty awesome. The Transworx programs. So vocational rehabilitation or DRS, they can actually support people with disabilities in many of those same things relative to, career exploration, job search assistance, job development. They can potentially support additional training as needed to achieve an employment goal. And so in this case, what we're thinking about for DRS is how can they best support people who are LGBTQ+ identified, including those who might be living with HIV or AIDS, in returning to work. So with that, there's again, there's a range of things that they can do, but yeah, I think overall we're really talking about people who experience barriers to employment as it relates to their disability, at least for DRS reasons. And so when we think about LGBTQ+ identified folks, those living with HIV and AIDS, it sounds like Mark did a great job this morning outlining, I'm sorry I missed it, but outlining some of the stigma and challenges that people with HIV and AIDS face related to, finding employment. These are also things that, potentially DRS can help with. The other unique kind of piece about DRS is just as Chicago House talks about supporting folks relative to their identities and developing in that sense, DRS is really going to be the one that can help support that person in identifying, if they haven't already, what reasonable accommodations they might need, as well as navigating that process with an employer. So how is it that, someone who experiences a disability that can present that barrier to work, potentially, how can they navigate that accommodation as well as that disclosure?
Excellent. Thank you, DJ. And that's actually a very nice segue into our next panel question. So a question for you all, and I'll go in the same order. We'll go with AFC, Chicago House, and then to DJ. What steps are taken to discuss with businesses and employers the value of employing this population or these populations?
I'll go first since L'Oreal did. I think the biggest thing that we can emphasize is education and more education on the side of HR professionals, business owners, CEOs, specifically because, they're the ones who actually hold the ball when it comes to employment and giving people chances and opportunities. I think the biggest thing that we need to realize is systemically, people have been discriminated against creed, color, sexual orientation across the board. But now that we have to consider the fact that we are in a more evolved world and society, those different stigmas need to diminish, specifically because we're used to working robotically. We took out the human portion of being an employee and an employer. People tend to forget that we are people first. So that is the first basic necessity, but it's also the pinnacle to evolution and evolving to a society where we are more inclusive and understanding that people have a right to live, point blank, period. And another thing that we need to emphasize is that it's okay to use your emotional intelligence when it comes to dealing with people on a case-by-case basis. I believe that if we open ourselves up to understanding that whether we are traditional in the way that we live, or we are more evolved in the way that we live, we are people first. So that education needs to be across the board when it comes to hiring at large. I have a master's in HR. I have a master's in business administration. And in my studies, I was taught to be a robot. I was taught to think and follow rules and protocols, but I was never taught to actually look at a person as an individual. And I think that will be the best thing that we can do across the board, is to allow people to be human and to utilize what we were born and capable of being, and that's a compassionate individual. We need to be unbiased when it comes to that, because essentially the payback for that is astronomical. Because if we allow people who are living their lives to the best of their abilities to become employed, that is an economic boost for not only your business, but the community at large. It helps to reduce recidivism. So if you are employing someone who would have otherwise made a decision counter to this decision that they made, because we work with people who were formerly incarcerated. So a lot of them, when we're dealing with trans, when we're dealing with LGBTQ, when we're dealing with AIDS and HIV, where was their support? So a lot of them were forced into situations, and a lot of people don't want to say it that way, but it is what it is. They were forced into the decisions and the situations that they are now in. And then after they've gone away and they're coming back, they're still fighting against every stigma that they fought against before they got into that situation. So if we allow them to become employed, we'll allow them to become educated. Guess what? That's the win for everybody. That's the win for the community, because you're increasing your productivity, you're increasing your services, you're allowing this person to now gain a sense of independence, but there's also an interdependence, specifically because now you have a whole community of people who are supporting forward progress in a positive manner. I'm off my soapbox, I'm sorry.
Not only that, it allows them to give them a second chance, just because an individual may have had trauma or barriers to employment that may have ended up of them being in jail or prison. It gives them that opportunity to come out and make a change. If you employ these individuals, it gives them the opportunity to make a contributor income to their families. I think that, as we've continued to try to develop our employment, we've been examining 3 employment interventions to connect with our clients. So that's around navigation services. How can we hire those individuals? But as Tamika said, sometimes our individuals at the table are the individuals that may not walk the same life as the individual that you're serving. So having those individuals at the table, employing them, being able to guide us. So with one of our programs, we have a peer navigator that may have, that share their stories, that recruit clients that walk maybe not the same exact path of life, but they are able to see an individual that may have looked like them or done or had some type of past as them, being able to enlighten them and give them a positive hope to want to come out and change. And I think that that's what's been definitely helping us. We've also been offering web-based interventions with our clients and community-based events. But I think we need more training. We need more employment for individuals of our community. And it's kind of hard breaking into that So if we can get more opportunities out there, I think it will definitely help with recidivism for our.
And let me just add this, as an employer, as a CEO, put this into your vocabulary, put this into your frame of thought. When you run into an individual who is different from you are, and you know that you are in the position to help them, ask them one simple question: how can I serve you? Because as a leader, as an individual, you are a servant, and it is your, get to the position where you are. You never know a person's potential. Allow them to show you that, allow them to use their experiences, their skills, their abilities to harness themselves so that they can begin to become an ambassador for someone else. Just ask the question, how can I serve you? And that will help you along the way.
That is absolutely fantastic. And Tamika, L'Oreal, I don't know if y'all have a newsletter, but I think you just got a whole bunch of new subscribers in the chat. So, so Lynnea, just for continuity here, let me repeat the question for our audience. What steps are being taken to discuss with businesses and employers the value of employing these populations?
Well, we do a couple different things at Chicago House. One thing that we do is we do employer trainings. And as it's been mentioned, training is really needed. There is a desire for people to learn, and especially employers to understand, be it that they're forced or be it that they really want to serve people, that there is a need for people to understand things like pronouns. What is discrimination? What's harassment in the workplace? Because, you know, in Chicago, you can't use an inappropriate pronoun, or you need to address people how they want to be addressed. Otherwise, that is harassment, and people don't understand this. And also, for employers to understand statistics about the folks that they're hiring. Sometimes people just don't have the information, and they'd like the information. And so Chicago House has done a variety of different things where, you know, we're working on behalf of clients. And so if we had all the resources in the world, we would probably have an entire education wing in our program. But what we do is the staff and I, we present to employers who are wanting to hire our clients. And so, and we do a training with them and have small group discussions to break down bias. We talk about policy in their organizations and like bathroom policies or pronoun policies, or do they have a transition policy? And we also work with them in small groups to discuss bias, like gender bias. Sometimes it's about vocabulary that people don't have. A lot of times it has to do with just people having bias and not understanding what that is. And then also policies are really huge too, right? Like you can be really good-hearted and want to help everyone, but if your policies suck, they just suck. And so in our organization, like in Chicago House, what we have been doing with employer trainings is that, you know, we did have at some time a little bit different funding and like some seed money to do employer trainings, and we were doing them more. But what we have found is that everyone now wants to be trained. And that's great. Like there's a call, like people are like, please help us understand. In my department, we don't have the ability to train everyone. Like, so for example, if a school is facing a lawsuit because they don't know how to deal with bathroom policies, like we're not necessarily the best people to train that school. So we're looking at employers that, like, for example, we've done trainings, extensive trainings with H&M. H&M, I can't remember their tagline. They have been an amazing supporter. It's like, be more yourself. I'm saying it wrong, I apologize, but like, you know, it fits into their stream of what they're trying to do as an agency. And they're also working now with more bigger, like on a policy level, because they're a global company. We're a community-based nonprofit, right? Like, so doing, I think mandating trainings is really great and important and helpful. And then also doing particular outreach, like our focus on clients is very individualized. So I don't have 100 people in my program that all want to go into retail. Like, it's very specific. So if a client comes to us and says that they're looking for a particular area that they'd like to engage in, we may look at who our partners are before that we've trained. We also have a huge part of our clients are getting into HIV and nonprofit. So nonprofit also has a problem of not understanding how to address people and hire people like with appropriate pronouns, their policies. Like they have good intentions, but a lot of times the intersectionality of how people are served is not shaken out to be like we imagine. So we also do a lot of trainings with employers and nonprofits that serve our clients as well, or hire our clients, like entry-level people, because also people are facing discrimination a lot. So there's a lot of one-to-one stuff we're doing, and then also honing in to where we can train people, and then building resource within my department. Like if somebody comes to us and says, help, please train us, and we don't have the capacity, I am building more on a network of organizations that do, so I can refer people. Like, so if the school that is facing a lawsuit wants a training, like there is a place like Safe Schools Alliance, is probably a better fit. And so making sure that as a department, I also, and my team understands where to refer people to, and I also think that I just want to mention last about, in my department, one thing that I think is super important, we used to have like more of an outreach focus to employers. But when you're really individualized working with clients, it's really hard to reach out because it really depends on the relationships that your organization has and the relationship that the department has with certain employers. So I think that integrating outreach within any work that's done, like with all staff, is really important. So that's something that I'm really trying to promote, is that the team that I work with, we're not, we're very social service focused. Well, social service focus doesn't necessarily always relate to employer. Like, it's business and social services have different ideas of success. But I think that when we're outreaching and training and talking about on a whole what our clients are telling us they need, and we're advocating, then we have a built relationship as a team and as an organization to express like what our clients need, and that gap can possibly start to get closed a little more. Because that's just something that I've, in my experience in being in nonprofit and working in employment arenas, it's really hard for someone who is a social worker to take the mindset of an employer and vice versa. And so there's that too. So hoping, I think in outreach, there needs to be thought around that too. And I think in Chicago House, we have the opportunity to do that, where our whole team is engaging with employers to show the varied experiences and where the biases can be broken down. So that way some people can move forward in these, like trying to get jobs, and little by little employers are getting more educated and more interested in valuing what people have to offer. I mean, I think Tamika and L'Oreal said it beautifully, like people have all sorts of skills and talents that are not being tapped into. And so, I will just echo what they said in terms of that, but I do think for like diversity quotas, people they're kind of hungry for this training, but my work is not, and my team's work is not to meet the diversity quota. It's to ensure that people have stable careers and pathways, that people are learning and breaking down bias, because the quota won't do that.
Thank you, Lynnea. That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. DG, I'm going to go ahead and repeat the question just for clarity for the audience, but I also have an addendum if that's okay, because there was a question in the chat. So what steps are being taken to discuss with businesses and employers the value of employing these populations? And a question was asked, what is George Washington University doing or aware of for any large scale efforts towards HR?
Okay, well, to start, I don't know how I follow everybody that, I mean, Tamika and L'Oreal, you started with a mic drop right there, and then Lynnea, you just added to it. So thanks, y'all. I appreciate that. Like, leave me out to dry, right? But for real though, like when I start thinking about this in terms of, so the vocational rehabilitation agencies, or DRS in this case, what's interesting about them and public, and all public workforce development programs is they actually are tasked with serving employers and looking at employers as one of their customers as well, right? So that means that they need to meet the needs of the employer. And I think part of that comes back to what Lynnea just said about in this moment, there is this kind of scrambling on so many employers trying to essentially say, oh, we need to diversify our staff. We need to have more diversity, right? But diversity and meeting a quota, as Lynnea said, that's not going to cut it. We need to move from diversity to actual inclusion, right? So everybody's kind of throwing these words, diversity, equity, inclusion around. And unless those start to get defined in a way that employers can start to understand, then we're going to continue to see the same cycle perpetuated, right? So one of the things that we have talked about is in ways of approaching employers includes flexibility. So Tamika, this goes back to what you said, like, how can I serve you? I would echo that sentiment 100%. And if it's okay, I would add to it. We want to look at flexibility. The reality is if you're an employer and you want to have a diversified workforce, you got to have some flexibility, and you got to have the flexibility to be able to recognize that not everybody's going to see everything the same. And that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Because that's essentially the definition behind diversity, is having a diversity of worldviews, mental models, whatever that looks like. And it's through that you strengthen your business, right? So, I think that that's like a really key piece of this. The other thing is when we start talking about these populations in particular, especially when we start talking about trans people of color, Black, Brown, Indigenous, trans folks, they have experienced in so many instances, so much oppression that likely trauma is a part of that past. All right. So that's the other thing that we really need to be cognizant of, and that I would encourage employers to be cognizant of. So we can get, our folks in the door, right? The work that Lynnea's group is doing, for example, and that Tamika and L'Oreal, that your groups are doing around supporting folks so that they can get to work. That's great. That's great. And the next thing that we need is we actually need employers to recognize that sometimes some of these folks may have some challenges in making this transition. This also goes for any of our folks that have experienced poverty long-term, because poverty also creates trauma, right? It's a trauma in and of itself. And when we talk about trauma, part of what we see is we see an instability that can occur, and that can come out for folks in the workplace. So what we need employers to understand is, as folks are transitioning, as they're just getting started, working in a steady job, right, requires a certain amount of stability. And that may be something that some of these new employees have to work their way into. And so this is where we come back to that flexibility, right? We really need flexibility in order to support these folks as they make this transition, right? And that includes not saying what's wrong with you. That includes saying, hey, what happened? How can I serve you? Right? Like Tamika said. So I think that those are really important ways to address employers as we're talking about it, and say, hey, if you really mean that you want to diversify your staff, and you are genuine and authentic in that, then it requires a bit of a paradigm shift, right? And it requires a little bit of sharing the power that employers have had, co-construction. That's where we need to, those are the moves that we need to move towards. Now, as far as what is GW doing or what are they aware of when it comes to kind of the larger HR field, I can tell you that the Academy of Human Resource Development, AHRD, which is kind of the big governing entity for the Academy, as well as for a lot of, HR organizations, et cetera, I believe is really focusing based on their conference kind of pieces. They're focusing on that transformation. They're recognizing that we need to redefine work. When we think about what we've all just been through, you all, like what we continue to go through with COVID-19, guess what? Employers have just proven that they can be flexible. Now they need to apply it to the folks who they have deemed not as worthy, right? So we know that it can happen. We know that they're capable of it. Now it's time for us to take a step back and say, if you really want to diversify your workforce, your workforce, and you really, really want to make this world a better place, quite frankly, then you got to be willing to embrace that flexibility that you did for this whole, how many months are we going on at this point? So like I said, I do think there are moves. I think that there's being more critical, like as far as the university tracks, I think we're seeing more critical scholarship coming up, and we're looking at different ways to do things. The last thing I'll say real quick is that when it comes to this flexibility that I keep talking about, I think about this in terms of disability and the whole idea around reasonable accommodations, right? Reasonable accommodations, something like it's bananas, y'all. It's like 90%. Right, of reasonable accommodations, like cost $500 or less. And the majority of those actually cost nothing, because you know what? That flexibility that begets someone to be able to, I don't know, work from home, like that doesn't cost anything. Yeah, you might have to rewrite some policies. So there might be a little time, but really like, dollars to donuts right out there, it's not going to cost a lot. So.
Wow, DJ, thank you. That great stuff. Great stuff all around. I'm blown away. So much of the next question was actually touched upon in your responses, but I do want to read it and just allow anybody to make a quick comment if there's anything that they prepared to say that they still want to say. I don't want to leave anything off the table here, and then we can go to the final question in the interest of time, if that's okay. So the next question was, what strategies can you share regarding teaching administrators, all of us here today, on how to assess where our customers are and how to improve outreach to them and the population as a whole? And I'll just kind of let a quick round robin here on that question, and we'll start with Lynnea, please.
You said you're starting with Lynnea. Okay, I just want to make sure I heard that right, that we're going out of round.
Well, change it up,
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So, how can we reach more people? I know for Chicago House, in the pandemic has been a horrific experience. At the same time, as DJ had mentioned, it also, not just for all employers, we have had to have tremendous flexibility and change the way we do everything. And I think that access, I know for Chicago House, we have now come into a new century with our technology and having ways that clients can reach us, and through the ease of online platforms, making it clear what our practices is like how they can connect. A lot of it is like these system structures, so making sure that clients can connect with us, making sure that they can walk in and see us, making sure they can call us and see us, making sure they can fill out an online form if that works. And I think that we are well on our way of doing that much more efficiently. COVID made that happen with just like access to things. Like we had to really deeply think about that. And so we are getting a lot more people now and a flow of clients than ever before because these systems are more structured. I hope that answered the question, but I think this one should be shorter than the others. So I'll stop there.
That's fine. DJ, please.
Sure. I guess my quick message for all of you as administrators, and I'm going to make this quick too. A couple of things though. One, if your agency does not have trauma informed, if they don't have that awareness, I would strongly encourage you all to consider maybe figuring out how to get some training on how to use a trauma informed approach, for all the reasons that we talked about before. And, the other thing that I would say about, outreach to this population, make sure your staff understands all of these issues. I heard everybody on this panel say it. People need to know what pronouns are. They need to know the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation, because there's a difference. You know, and the reality is for folks that are from these populations, I'll say as a non-binary person myself, I'm going to know real quick whether or not I'm going to think that you're going to be all that accepting. And part of that's going to be on whether or not you can even use the correct terminology and use my pronouns and not look at me like I'm from outer space when I say that my pronouns are they, them, theirs. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Excellent. L'Oreal?
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just, well said, Lynnea and DJ. I will go back to the flexibility. I'll just give a scenario. We had a client that was able to secure a job in the suburbs, and it was a far out in the suburbs. And due to COVID, they changed the bus route, so he had to do a detour, but the bus stopped at 1 a.m. Guess what? He didn't have any, and he was traveling from the south side of Chicago, so he did not have any other accessibility to transportation, so he had to quit his job. So being able to be flexible, understanding that travel may be, they may be traveling from a far distance, but seeing them as a human, not only that they do have trauma, they have barriers, but if they're willing to try, work with them, ask open-ended questions to understand their walk of life. They may be reluctant on opening and sharing, but if you show some type of compassion, I think that they will be willing to open up. They may not, you know, there's a lot of stigma around if you're dealing with a client that is positive, so they may not share their status, being that it's a lot of stigma around it. But being with individuals that are positive, also, they have a lot of barriers to continuing to be engaged in care. They need to continue to have those flexibility with attending doctor's appointments. They may not be always at their highest peak. They may have down days where it may not be, it may be a challenge for them. So being able to be flexible and understanding helps this the consumers go a long way. I also have a story where I personally worked with a trans woman, and they, as DJ said, have a lot of different barriers, and we were able to employ the individual at our agency. And the first day that the individual came in, they came in dressed in a fishnet, showing their undergarment. I just pulled them to the side, and instead of sending her home, I was able to offer her, how can I help you? You know, this is the dress code. How can I make you feel more comfortable? And she was able to take in. It was like, oh, this is my first job. I didn't know that I was not supposed to wear this. So we worked around giving her a sweater, and she felt more comfortable. And then that kind of changed the dynamic of her being able to open up and share and say, hey, I don't have access to those type of clothing. How can I work with you? So we were able to gather, you know, I asked family, friends to donate different items. We didn't go as far as like very professional, but business casual. And she was well accepting to that. So being flexible, understanding that, because they may not have the accessibility to buy, if it's no dress code, to have that. So if you show them that you're willing to work with them, I think it goes a long way. It makes an impact, not only on the individual, but whatever the individual, we don't know what someone is going through. So don't assume just because I have a smile on my face, don't mean that I don't have a lot of baggage on my back.
Absolutely. Well said, L'Oreal.
Yeah.
Tamika?
L'Oreal basically took my whole answer, but but as the employment specialist, I am actually working in the capacity to be able to offer those different resources. Again, is how can I serve you? So asking open-ended questions, just and creating an environment. Like that's the one thing that a lot of people don't understand. You have to create the environment that is inviting. You as a person need to be relatable. I personally would not talk to a person that I felt was just treating me like a number. But if you called me by my name, if you called me by my correct pronouns, I happen to go by she, her, and hers. But if I were a they or them, I would expect you to relate to me as a they them. If I were a he, I would, I would expect that. So it's the expectancy. But I think the other thing is we have to be willing and vulnerable enough to ask the appropriate questions. I don't think that another person would say, what do you like me to call you? What would you like to go by? And by actually practicing that in an actual conversation with that person, that puts the onus on you, but it actually helps you in that situation and in other situations to be able to relate to that person as they feel comfortable being related to. So ask the question. Nobody expects you to know everything, but we expect you to be vulnerable enough and human enough to ask the question, how can I serve you? How would you to relate to you? But in the employment spectrum, because of the fact some people are not ready to go into a job setting, what educational opportunities do you have? What professional development opportunities do you have? Help that person build and grow as they need to, so that once they are placed in a different situation, they can elevate and grow. So I think the best thing is not to assume, ask the questions, be open, be relatable, and follow their lead.
Again, well said. I mean, that's kind of the hallmark of this panel, and I thank you all for your time, your inputs, your sharing. We did have one question left on the table, which is if you give one piece of advice to the audience, what would it be? So just real quick lightning round, starting with DJ. Parting shot.
Of course. You know what? I'll just go back to what I said earlier, flexibility.
Tamika?
Practice emotional intelligence, and if you don't know what it is, research it and figure it out.
L'Oreal?
Educate yourselves, have some compassion, understand that everyone has a different walk of life. We are all not perfect, and put yourself sometimes in the shoes that you of the story that's in front of you.
And Lynnea?
I would say disability and our understanding of what a disability is really needs to be expanded. It's not something that people can always see. And our idea of it being of a negative and victim experience isn't necessarily the case. We're very narrow-minded as a culture, how we think of disability. And that should really come into the fold in the work and working with LGBTQ, trans folks, especially, and people living with HIV.
Excellent. Well, for our audience, I do want to let everyone know that we do have Lynnea has been so gracious, and she's helping us facilitate a panel this afternoon for our employers in practice. And for our lunch section, DJ will be having a breakout session as well. So I encourage you to look at the breakout sessions and see which of those interest you. But I do want to, again, thank our panelists for your time, your advocacy, just the great thoughts. I mean, the chat is just blowing up. This was just a fantastic discussion, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as myself and the audience. Thank you.